What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Rundown with Payton and Marcus. I'm Marcus. He's Payton. First of all, it's Thursday night, and we're doing the show when
Thursday
we're
and we're
supposed to.
here.
We're doing the
Thursday
show when
and
we're
we're here.
supposed to. Look at that. Look at that. I don't know if there's any wrestling fan watching, but I just wanted to take this quick second to acknowledge my tribal chief Roman Reigns and acknowledge the bloodline. That's why I have a hat on. Also, I need a haircut. That's the other reason why I have a hat on. But that's neither here nor there. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in. We're going to start. This is an all football show. We are going to start with it's not really breaking news, but it is, I guess, the most relevant thing to discuss right now. For those who don't know, maybe a week and a half ago, I think at this point, there was a picture that hit the interwebs. I first saw it on Twitter of Jerry Jones, like 60 years ago, standing outside of a school in Arkansas. It was during the time when, I think this was like around the time of this is post Brown versus the Board of Education. This is like when black kids were allowed to start going to schools where white students were. Uh, Unfortunately, we couldn't pull the picture because I just forgot. So I'm sorry about that. But so if you haven't seen the picture, but it's a picture of these black students trying to go into a school, and a young Jerry Jones is pictured in a group of white students trying to keep them from going into the school. Um, there's been a lot of reactions. Stephen A. obviously has reacted to it because Stephen A. is a friend of Jerry Jones, and Stephen A. has been called a sellout because of him saying that because we don't know what Jerry Jones's intentions were in the picture, there's no way to really tell what exactly he was doing because he is a little far back. He's like further back in the crowd. He's just kind of like he looks more like a bystander than an actual participator. But it's up to your interpretation of what you think. LeBron James last night after the Lakers game mentioned at the end of his media scrum, he basically posed a question to the media saying he just wanted to know why no one asked him a question about Jerry Jones, but everyone was very quick to ask him and other basketball players about what was going on with Kyrie Irving and the whole anti-Semitism thing. And it was just a very interesting. It was a very interesting development. So I just wanted to start the show with that. What were your reactions to not just the Jerry Jones photo, but also like LeBron's post-game comments last night after the game in his media scrum?
I mean, my reaction to the Jerry Jones photo is that we don't know what's going on in the photo. Like obviously we can tell what's going on in the photo. We don't know what Jerry Jones's involvement in it is. Also, it was 60 years ago, and if he's just standing there, like he could just be like pulling up to see what is going on because there's clearly a dispute. So that's like up for interpretation. That's for other people to decide, not me. And I guess only Jerry Jones and the other people were there know what was going on 60 years ago, if they even remember. And then as far as LeBron's comments, I believe the comparison is apples to oranges. Like I don't see the correlation between nobody asking him about what Jerry Jones was doing 60 years ago versus what Kyrie was doing like these past like 6 months. I feel like obviously one story is certainly more relevant than the Jerry Jones photo that has surfaced, and even like Stephen A, like you said, has been like catching heat because he kind of was like, we don't know what's going on. But at the end of the day, we don't know what's going on with in that photo with Jerry Jones. Like that's like such an open book for like interpretation and figuring out what that means. So I feel like LeBron's comments, while I understand where he's trying to get at, I think he's kind of missing the ball because I don't think him not getting asked about Jerry Jones is a cause for concern versus getting asked about Kyrie Irving.
So for those guys who haven't seen the picture, just pull the picture up on Twitter, and I hope the ring light doesn't ruin the quality. It probably will, but this is the picture. Jerry Jones is in the back there. That's his head. It's kind of hard to see because I have these right here. Let me actually turn them off for just a hot second. This is Jerry Jones's head. That's the head. It's circled. And this is in Arkansas. These are the students who are trying to get into the school. So like Jerry Jones is far enough in the back of this photo where there's no way of knowing specifically what he's doing. So that's number one. And I think that it is possible to do what Stephen A. did. I think it is very possible to defend Jerry Jones and also agree with what LeBron James said. Because as you said, and as Stephen A. and others have said, there is no way to tell in this picture specifically what Jerry is doing, what his role is. Right now, this is a video. Obviously, that'd be much different because we can see what he was doing at the time. This is a picture. it's very hard to see what Jerry Jones is doing. I've seen people kind of say that like, oh, well, Jerry Jones has never hired a black coach, and he didn't support Colin Kaepernick, and so this only like kind of fuels the fire. And you can make that argument. I think that's a little bit of a stretch to make. I'm not going to sit here and castrate Jerry Jones for being pictured in this picture, because you can make a lot of assumptions based on what he was doing. I'd much rather deal in fact. Granted, Jerry Jones hasn't come out to say what he was or wasn't doing. And I mean, it was all like 60 years ago. It's possible that Jerry Jones doesn't remember what he was doing in this picture 60 years ago. So it's a very touchy subject. Here's what I will say, though. This is where I will say that I agree with LeBron James to this degree, because you guys remember when Kyrie was talking about, kind of the whole anti-Semitism thing. One of the things he mentioned was that he would like for the same energy that the media has about things like anti-Semitism to be kept when we are talking about things that have to do with his people. By his people, he means African Americans, he means black people. Because, as we know, things happen to black people in this country, and it's very rarely touched on for an extended period of time, right? Whether it's police brutality, whether it's an act of racism, it gets maybe a couple minutes of fame, a couple minutes of shine in the media cycles, and then it's forgotten about, which tends to be the way that things have gone for the better part of really forever in America. And it's a valid point, and it's true. This isn't so much so about why isn't LeBron specifically being asked the question. I think that's a little bit too micro. I think the macro of it is that the idea is Kyrie Irving made a mistake. He's a human being that made a mistake. He's an African-American human being that made a mistake, and it dominated all news cycles. Like, not just sports media, but like it was on regular TV, cable news, Channel 5, Channel 4, whatever, for the duration of it happening. This picture from Jerry Jones has resurfaced. It was talked about maybe once or twice sporadically throughout the course of when it had first surfaced, and it hasn't been touched on since. It's a very valid point for LeBron James to make. I've seen people kind of say, well, like, why would someone ask an NFL question to a basketball player? That's too micro. That's not really getting to the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is there are things when black people make a mistake, it's much more broadcasted than when white people make a mistake, or are perceived to make a mistake. And I agree with LeBron 100%. Now we've gotten rid of all this serious stuff, let's talk about some fun stuff. There's two things to talk about with the college football playoff. Number one, it is official. Come 2024, we will have a 12-team college football playoff, which I personally am super excited for. The other thing that is worth noting is it's bowl season. Like we're at the bowls, which means we pretty much know right now who's going to be in the college football playoff. Right now, Georgia's the 1 seed, Michigan's the 2 seed, TCU is the 3 seed, and USC is the 4 seed. Alabama and Ohio State are 6 and 5 respectively. They'd be the first 2 teams out. No matter what happens this weekend, or by the time we get there, should the top 4 that's in the top 4 now be the 4 teams in the college football playoff, or do you think there's a room for one of these other teams immediately outside, and the other 2 teams that are outside the top 4 are Tennessee and Penn State, to maybe sneak into the top 4 into the college football playoff this year?
Yeah, I think there is a chance that there's definitely a mix-up this weekend. Georgia's in no matter what. Michigan's in no matter what. But TCU and USC, if they lose, they're out. Like, I honestly believe a one-loss TCU, if TCU goes and loses to Kansas State, I don't see them getting in. Mainly because I think that even though Ohio State got destroyed by Michigan, a one-loss Ohio State team gets the nod over a one-loss TCU team. Now, if USC loses, they have 2 losses, they're done. They're completely done. But what would be interesting to me is that if only one of them loses, let's say if TCU loses or if USC loses, Ohio State and Bama are the 2 first out. You said Ohio State was 5 and Bama was 6, right?
Yep.
I would give the nod to Bama even though they have 1 more loss than Ohio State. Because they're in the SEC. Yes, that's everyone's going to be SEC bias. Yeah, there's a reason, because the SEC is better. Like, the SEC is a better conference. They're playing harder teams. And Bama, their 2 losses were by 1 possession on the road. I think they were both by 1 point, actually, on the road. And I would give them, I think they're a better team than Ohio State. They're a more complete team than Ohio State. I personally would give them the nod at the 4 seed if USC or TCU were to lose over Ohio State. at 5.
Georgia, Michigan, USC, and TCU are all playing in their conference championship games. Ohio State and Alabama is not.
Yeah.
Nothing that can happen this weekend should change the top 4. Alabama has 2 losses. And I get it that it's Alabama, but not only does this team have 2 losses, they're not playing in the SEC championship. How many times in the history of the college football playoff in this format has a 2-loss team that didn't make that didn't play in their conference championship game make the Final Four for the college football playoff? I don't think that's ever happened. Ohio State, I agree with you. I think they have a stronger case because while they're not playing, while they are not playing in their conference championship game, they only have 1 loss, and that 1 loss is to one of the teams in the top 4. So Ohio State has a stronger case, and if one of these 4 teams were not to make it, I think Ohio State has a better claim to get into the top 4 than Alabama. Under no circumstance should Alabama be playing in one of the 2 college football semifinal games because they haven't earned it. I get it. It's Alabama. It's Nick Saban. They've been doing great things. Alabama has sucked this season. This has not been a good football team this season. This has not been the Alabama college football team that we know and love or hated over the past couple seasons. Under no circumstance should the Alabama Crimson Tide be playing in one of the college football the only way I'd even consider it, and it'd still be a hard no from me or a soft no from me. The only way I consider it is if all 4 teams in the top 4 lose. If all 4 teams in the top 4 lose, then you have to go to the drawing board. But even then, if all 4 teams in the top 4 lose, TCU would have 1 loss. And I think all the other teams would have 1 or 2 losses. But even still, all 4 of these teams played in their conference championship game, and Alabama didn't. So, again, there is no case that you can make, in my opinion. There's no case that you can make to get Alabama into the Final Four. Ohio State, maybe because their 1 loss came to Michigan, who is the 2nd-ranked team in the nation right now. That's it. Alabama should not be in the conversation for the top 4. Honestly,
I get that. I get your point.
Needs to stay the same, or it needs to be 1- with Ohio State in it. Alabama doesn't deserve it.
I get your point, but Ohio State got trampled at home against Michigan. They got destroyed.
1 loss, though. But
What?
That's their only loss.
I get that. I get that, but they're playing worse competition throughout the year because they're in the Big Ten. Same thing with TCU. If TCU goes and stinks up the joint against Kansas State, I get that they're playing in their conference championship game, but they're playing in the Big 12 conference championship game, and they just got beat by a 3-loss Kansas State team. That holds a lot more weight to me than losing to an LSU team that was extremely hot by 1 point on the road in LSU, and also losing to Tennessee that was red hot. Huh?
But LSU was ranked 14th in the country, though. So that's still a bad, hot or not, that's still a bad loss. I know at the time they were in the top 10. I think at the time when they lost, they were in the top 10. They were 7th, I think, when they played Alabama. But as it stands right now, LSU is ranked 14th, and they're ranked 14th because LSU sucks. That's a bad loss, no matter how you cut it. Alabama has 2 losses. How many times has a 2-loss football team has a 2-loss football team that didn't make their conference championship game make it into the Final Four under this format? I don't think that's ever happened.
I don't think it's
Alabama shouldn't be the first just because it's Alabama. Because if it was Tennessee or Penn State or Clemson or Kansas State or some of these other teams that maybe could still have a shot, if it was any other team, we wouldn't be saying, oh, well, maybe Alabama could get in. I honestly only think that Alabama even has a chance of making it into the Final Four is because it's Alabama, and because of Alabama is a household name, and because under this format, Alabama's always been in the mix. And I get that. That shows the dominance of Alabama under Nick Saban under this college football format. But this is what have you done for me lately? This season, Alabama hasn't been good, and they shouldn't be rewarded with one of these top 4 seeds because of name value. The 4 best teams in the country should be based on what they did this season. And this season, Alabama hasn't been one of the 4 best teams in the country. And even if TCU loses, I understand it's a Big 12. It'd still be their first loss. Kansas City's a top 10 team in the country. Kansas State is a top 10 team in the country. Kansas State's not a bad football team. They've also had some tough losses as well. But I'm more so focused on never before has a 2-loss football team that didn't make their conference championship game make it to the college football playoff under this format. Alabama shouldn't be the first just because of Alabama. Because if it was any other school, it would be open and shut. This is the only thing that would change would be maybe Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and USC moves around in the top 4, but that would still be the top 4. this was any other school, not Alabama. Like and Alabama 6th too, which means Ohio State would have to fall twice. You'd be over if. What I'm saying is, if one team loses, and let's say it's TCU, because I think we all recognize that even though TCU is third, they are the weakest of the 4 teams in the top 4. Even though they are third and undefeated, they're not as big of a name as a UCA or USC or Michigan or Georgia. If TSU is out, I'd put Ohio State in before I put in Alabama. The only way I look Alabama's way is if one of these 2 teams are no longer in the top 5 or in the top 4. If only one team's out, I'd put in Ohio State before Alabama. Ohio State deserves it more than Alabama does.
Maybe I can see the argument for both sides. I really can. But if Michigan goes out and loses to Purdue in the Big Ten championship game, that would, in my eyes, make that loss seem even worse for Ohio State, putting Bama above them. So that means that if a USC loses, would you rather have 2-loss USC or 2-loss Bama? Like
I'd rather have a 2-loss USC because they've had bigger wins this season than Alabama has.
Yeah, but then USC's 2 losses come to Utah. You can't get beat by the same team twice.
But being beat by the same team twice and one of those losses being in the conference championship, to me, means more than having 2 losses and not even having played in your conference championship this weekend is what I like. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's like when you look at it like from an NFL standpoint, and I'll just use this comparison because they're playing this weekend, right? The Bengals have beaten the Chiefs twice so far over the last year and a half now, going into now their 3rd game, right? I look at this team and I say, okay, if we're doing a college football ranking type thing and the Bengals have beaten the Chiefs, I'd look at that and I say, the Chiefs are still a good football team. They just can't get past the Chiefs. They just can't, or the Chiefs are a good football team. They just can't get it past the Bengals. Whereas you look at a team like, say, the Packers, for instance, or no, that's not a good example because the Packers suck. You look at a team like, I'm trying to think of a team that has okay, like the Bills, for instance, right? Who have 3 losses and they're all bad losses. That Bills team, even if they win this weekend and the Chiefs lose again, the Chiefs have dominated everyone else except for this one team that just happens to have their number, and they played in the game that mattered for their conference, and the Bills didn't. Like, Alabama's great, and Alabama's a good football team, and they've been dominant over the past decade of college football. But if USC loses again to Utah, okay, they've already done that, but they played in the conference championship. Like, Alabama's not going to be the SEC champion no matter what happens. Georgia can lose. Like no matter how you cut it, I will never be okay with a 2-loss non-conference champion in the top 4. That's not, you haven't earned it. You haven't earned to be playing for a national championship that way. And it's not hate against Alabama because I think Alabama's a good program. They just haven't been good this season, and they shouldn't be rewarded with the top 4. The only way Alabama's in is if TCU loses and USC loses, I would say. And even then, you can still make an argument that TCU deserves it because they'd have 1 loss on the season. No matter what happens to Georgia and Michigan, they're in. Whether they fall or whether they stay, they're in regardless. This is really a conversation of TCU and USC versus Ohio State and Alabama. And really, the only team I'm personally looking at and saying is on the bubble is USC, and that's because they're 4. Because TCU loses, the worst they could be to me is 4 because they only have 1 loss, and it's in the conference championship. I don't want to see Alabama in the top 4. It's not because I hate Alabama, it's just because they haven't earned it this season, in my opinion. And maybe that's why I'm not in charge of this, because I would adamantly argue against Alabama being in the top 4 because they haven't earned it.
I just think there is a extremely outlandish and unique scenario where Bama might get in. I don't think it will happen. I would not even bet a dime on it.
I agree with you. What I'm saying is, if Bama gets in, it's going to be because it's Alabama. It's not going to be because Bama earned it. Is what I'm saying. Do not like
okay.
You and your dad just commented this too, so I'm going to read. Like he said, no way USC gets in. They lose against Utah. I agree. If USC loses, they're probably out because they're 4. Do you know what I mean? So if USC and TCU loses, I'm looking at Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. That would be my top 4. Because TCU would still only have 1 loss on the season in a conference championship game. I'm not putting in Alabama just because TCU loses, because they'd have a better record. Regardless of who they lost to, and regardless of who Alabama lost to, they'd have a better record. You're not going to put a team in you're not going to take a team out that has a better record for a team that has a bigger name.
That's why they need to change the format.
Right, which is
because
why I hate
yeah,
this format, because this format benefits big name schools and the SEC, because the SEC is the tough. Like, it's not TCU's fault they're not in the SEC. They didn't. I mean, I guess it is because they couldn't move if they wanted to, but like, it's not their fault they're not in the SEC. It's fine. They're gonna win their conference championship game, so it's not even a discussion. But in the off chance they lose to Kansas State, I don't want to see TCU get punished for losing to Kansas State in what is a losable game, because despite Kansas State being the 10th ranked team in the nation, they're a good football team. So I just want to talk about that real quick. Let's
it is
get
a
into
big topic.
some. It is, and it's important. I don't want to see Alabama get favored, because they're always like, they're favored all the time. I'm sick of it. I want to see someone else win a championship, or at least play for a championship not involving Alabama. Let's talk pick'em. Excuse the graphic for the pick'em. I thought it was week 12. It's not. It's week 13.
Week 13.
Which is crazy to think.
It's flying by like it
So
always
these are the
does.
results, always, right? So these are the results from last week. And this
No,
actually
this is
not the results from last
yeah,
week.
this is
So
2 weeks
forget
ago.
that. This is the pick'em for this week. And excuse me again, that says week 12. It should say 13. No, what is this? This is last week's pick'em. Where's the pick'em for
What is going on?
What's happening right now? Hold on. Did you put your picks on the pick'em, Payton?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so maybe I just didn't go and download it like I should have. Okay, so while we do that, let's skip that. We're gonna go to power
Technical
rankings.
difficulties.
Yeah,
Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo.
it's my fault. I put the wrong pick'ems in the graphic. So we're gonna move on to power rankings while we grab that. These power rankings this week are kind of interesting, because there's a lot going on.
Yes.
Payton and I think for the first time all season, have vastly different top. I think this is the most difference we've had on our top fives so far.
Yeah.
I think our first one at week 4, we have all the same teams in different spots. I think last time we did this 4 weeks ago, we had one difference. This week we've got 2. Peyton has Kansas City and Miami, which we both agreed on, but then he has Dallas, San Fran, and Buffalo. And I have Philly, Dallas, and Cincinnati rounding out my top 5. So 2 questions, really. One's more, I guess, major than the other. Why no Philly for you in the top 5?
I cannot
75%.
I can't have Philly in the top 5 because they're not the best team in their division. And like,
really?
I get that they only have like one loss. I get it. But I'm not sold. And if you're asking me who I have more faith in between the Bills, I definitely have more faith in Josh Allen and the Bills than I do in the Eagles. And I certainly have more faith in the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo, who we had a whole we were the Jimmy Garoppolo fan club leaders last week during the show.
I'm proud of it. I have no problem.
Yeah. So I have more faith in Jimmy G and the 49ers than I do in the Eagles, along with the Cowboys and along with the Dolphins and along with especially the Chiefs. So at the end of the day, it's just, who do I have more faith in as of right now? And I get that the Eagles, they had a great win. I'm sorry, they had a great win against the Packers. If you're not a Packers fan, it was a great win.
Was that a great win? Really? Was it a great win?
Exactly.
It didn't look that good in the second half.
Exactly. Yeah. Every win that the Eagles have this year, except for almost every single one of them is like, except for that one game against the Vikings that we had a debate on, of course. But every game they've been a little bit rocky. They've been a little bit rocky, and I think that their record is a lot of like a product of circumstance, as opposed to like they're actually a top dog team in the NFC. I would have them at 6th. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have them cracking the top 5 as of right now with their recent struggles.
I can't get mad at that. Here's the deal. I was in, like Peyton said, I was right there with him, leading the bandwagon for Jimmy G and the Niners, but the Niners are not in my top 5. They're not right now in my top 5. And here's why. There is a team in Ohio that is not your Browns, Peyton. It's
never the Browns. Don't worry. It's never the Browns.
That has been that we are. This is deja vu, ladies and gentlemen, and I am once again leading the Joseph Lee Burrow bandwagon again down the stretch of the regular season, because everyone after the Super Bowl was like, "Oh, that's it for the Bengals. They're going to go back to being the Bungles." They got off to a rough start. I'll admit that. They've got off to a rough start. But what's been most impressive to me for the Bengals is they've been able to win games without Joe Mixon, without Jamar Chase, like without T. Higgins. Like, they've been winning football games. They have a game this Sunday, their biggest game of the season, just like it was last year at around this time. is against the Kansas City Chiefs. They're 2-0 against the Kansas City Chiefs. But what's most impressive to me, and why I think if the Bengals win this Sunday, the Bengals are going to remind everyone that they are a viable threat to make it out of the AFC again this season, is Joe Burrow has outplayed Pat Mahomes both times that the Chiefs play the Bengals, right? We've seen the Chiefs lose games. It hasn't always been because Pat Mahomes has been outplayed. It's been because of maybe it was a shootout. Last person that had the ball won the game. We very rarely, and if Pat Mahomes has been outplayed, he hasn't been outplayed twice. There's one other quarterback I can think of that outplayed Pat Mahomes on more than one occasion, and that was Tom Brady. That was obviously in the Super Bowl when the Bucs played the Chiefs, and that was in the AFC Championship game back a few years ago when D4 jumped off sides. But even in that game, look at that. Pat Mahomes played really good ball, and the Chiefs would have been in the NFC Championship game or in the Super Bowl if it weren't for D4 jumping off sides. So really, no one in the Pat Mahomes era has outplayed Pat Mahomes twice, except for Joe Burrow. I expect Joe Burrow to outplay Pat Mahomes again and win this football game again, which would be 3 straight wins against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that would likely make Joe Burrow the winningest quarterback against Pat Mahomes since he's been playing, which is ridiculous. He'd be the one quarterback Pat hasn't beaten, aside from Tom Brady, obviously. Although I think the Bucs played the Chiefs this year, and I think
he's gotten them. So, he's gotten them before.
Yeah. So this is a big game for this is a big game for the Bengals. I think this is when they let everyone know again that they are a viable threat to come out of to come out of the AFC again. I'm not predicting they're going to come out of the AFC, but we're right back where we were last season, where the Bengals are in a position to make some noise, shock the system, and
they're peaking at the right time again.
Again, they're peaking at the right time. Let's talk about playoff clinching scenarios, because there are 2 teams this season that can clinch a spot in the playoffs if they get the job done with a little bit of help. It is the Minnesota Vikings, which, of course, as you all know, pains me to say that as a Packers fan, and it is the Philadelphia Eagles. If the Vikings win this week, and the Dolphins and the Lions tie or lose, the Vikings will clinch the NFC North, which means they will clinch their division. For the Eagles, it's a little bit rough. For the Eagles, if the Eagles win and the Cowboys lose and the Commanders win, or they tie with the Giants, the Eagles will clinch a playoff spot. Not the division, but they'll clinch a playoff spot because the division is just too close to call right now. I think Seattle has to lose as well, or tie. So there's a lot happening. Which team do you think is more likely to punch the first ticket into the playoffs, Minnesota or Philly?
I mean, probably just Philly, because they're already a game up. Either way, both of these teams are going to get into the playoffs unless some incredible travesty happens.
Of course.
But these scenarios are still they're still they need help to get in as well, but they're going to get in. Both of them will get in. I would say I know for a fact that I don't have the Vikings winning Sunday because they're playing Mike White and the New York Jets, and I am on the Mike White wave. So no, I don't have the Vikings clinching this Sunday, so I guess I would pick the Eagles then.
And just to clarify, the Vikings are 9-2, the Eagles are 10-1, and of course they're actually 2 games ahead. Technically, they won the game, of course, because it's 10-9, but also 2 because they have the tiebreaker because they played each other. Minnesota clinches the NFC North Division title with a win or a Detroit loss or tie, or if somehow the Vikings and the Jets tie and the Lions lose, the Vikings will be the NFC North champions this year. And for the Eagles, they can clinch a spot in the playoffs. Not the division, but a spot in the playoffs if they win, Washington loses, San Francisco loses or ties, or Seattle loses or ties, as long as both San Francisco and Seattle don't tie. Or if Philly wins, San Fran and Seattle loses, and Washington ties, the Eagles will punch a ticket into the playoffs. So it's that time of year where we're going to start to see teams getting close and close to the playoff spot. The NFC North is up for grabs, but Philly can lock themselves into the playoffs with a win and some help. If we go back now to our pick'em, I think we have the right one in there. I think that's my apologies. Not that. This is this week's pick'em. Oh, there's a lot of.
It's a big week. It's a big week. I can make up some traction this week, bro.
And there are a lot of. So
it's a big week.
We are 3 games apart, and there are 3 Can I count? There's 4. We'd have 4 disagreements.
Yep.
Steelers at Falcons. Peyton has the Falcons over the Steelers. I have the Packers over the Bears. Mostly because I just can't bring myself to think the Bears are going to beat my Packers. But they probably are. But that's more so just a loyalty thing. I have the Vikings beating the Jets. And I have the Dolphins beating the 49ers. And what I think could be a Super Bowl preview. Which one of these 4 games do you think is going to be most exciting? Okay.
Oh, Dolphins.
Okay, let me rephrase. Dolphins 49ers is always going to be the most exciting. But of the other 3, which do you think is going to be the most exciting?
Jets and Vikings. They're both teams that are actually like decent. The Bears and Packers both suck, and the Falcons and Steelers both suck. So I would go with. I'm sorry, dude. You know the Packers suck.
I know it's just such a tough reality to live.
It's rough. It's rough. But welcome to being a bad team. Welcome to the bad team club. I've been here for years. I'm kind of the leader of this club at this point. But anyways, it's gonna be Jets and Vikings. You have the Mike White love story, the Cinderella story. He's gonna come in, he's gonna take it from this freaking cocky Zach Wilson guy from BYU, freaking weirdo. And then you have on the other side, either way, we're happy with whoever wins because the Vikings are like my team, like that I'm associated with, I guess, that I bailed on.
I abandoned
them.
Yeah.
But then you got Kirk Cousins, and
let's talk about that for a second.
Who knows?
This is the 3rd time this season that we've disagreed, and it's been because you've picked against the team that you said's going to the Super Bowl.
I know.
Peyton, what's wrong with you?
But hey, listen, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they do in the regular season. It matters what they do in the postseason if they want to go to the Super Bowl. Geez. So I have the Jets winning this Sunday, but guess what, dude? If Kirk Cousins wins and he's wearing, all the chains and he's all iced out after the game, bro, like I'm happy either way.
What a political answer from Peyton J. Doyle we just got there. Huh? That's actually I'm a little disappointed in you, Peyton, that you haven't been rock solid on your pick. It's okay though. It is okay. Can I just say, by the way, in our podcast league, Bragging Rights 2K 2022, I just want to take this time to boast a couple things. Number 1, I have the number 1 seed, so I have a bye, which feels good. Although I did just lose my game last week by 2 points, and do you want to know why I lost my game? I lost my game last week for 2 reasons. One of them makes me sad. One of them makes me kind of bittersweet. The first reason is because I forgot to take Raheem Mostert out of the lineup, and he was hurt last week. The other reason is because I didn't have faith in Adam Thielen, and he gave me 21 points. So that kind of sucked. But more importantly, Christian Watson had a great game this past Monday. Even though, was it Sunday? Sunday, even though we lost.
Yeah.
But he had a great game. That was the other reason why I lost. But I just want to point that out. I just want to take some time to brag about the fact that I have, although me and Peyton have the same record, but I have the number 1 seed.
Yeah, you do have the edge. I don't know how the tiebreaker is. I think it's points for.
I think I beat
you head to head.
You did. If it was head to head, I would not have the 1 seed. So I'm appreciative that it's points for and not head to head. One last thing before we go, because we are a bit over time. You mentioned it. What's Zach Wilson's future? Forget with the Jets in the NFL. Is Zach Wilson going to have a home next season?
Well, he'll have a home. We're not worried about him going homeless. But I think see that hoodie he's wearing? He's going to be wearing that all year next year. He's done. Stick a fork in the Zach Wilson era in New York. It is done. Over. Dunzo. Nada. Because that man, Mike White, he gave them the whitening in the bottle, the name of the episode that they needed. They have the offensive, superpower. It was like they get electrified, and it was in the rain. And he goes out there and completes over 70% of his passes, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I've never seen Zach Wilson have a single game like that in his entire career. And now you have guys like Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson. They're hyped up to go out there and play. They were not hyped up to go out there and play when Zach Wilson was the quarterback of that team. So you have your young wide receiver core hyped up. You have the running game was still really good, even when James Robinson was a healthy scratch. Then you have that defense, which is a championship caliber defense. The Jets are rolling, and Mike White is their guy. Zach Wilson is done. See ya.
Real quick, would you rather, just for an entire season, Mike White or Taylor Heineke?
Mike White. Mike White has done in 2. Obviously, he had a little bit of a rough. He had that really hot game last year and then fizzled out pretty fast. But these 2 games, if you just take the first start of last year and the first start of this year, those 2 games are better than anything that Taylor Heineke has ever done. And I get it.
But he's led his team to the playoffs.
Yeah, he has. Good for
He's
him.
going to do it again this
Mike
year.
White's about to do it right now. Mike White is about to do it right now. Mike White has that dog in him, bro. He has that dog in him. He's that underdog, bro. He's the underdog. I am a big believer in dudes who have that dog in them. Mike White, dog. He is going to take the Jets to the playoffs. All my Jets fans, if anyone here is listening that's a Jets fan, this is the best that I think I've ever talked about the New York Jets in my entire life. And Mike White is that guy. You guys are going to the playoffs for the first time since 2010. Book it.
If you're selling the Jets to the playoffs because of Mike White, or if that's what you're selling, I'm not buying. I'm not buying that.
Well, you can not buy it, but guess what? If you're knocking
on my door with that to sell as a door-to-door salesman, I'm not buying that.
Everyone says it's just one game. It's just one game.
It is.
Zach Wilson sucks, and they had a 6-4 record with Zach Wilson.
Who did the Jets play last week? I don't even remember.
They played the Bears. They played the Bears.
Okay, so a bad football team. Okay. If Mike White doubles down on that against your Super Bowl champion or your Super Bowl pick, excuse me, for the NFC, maybe I'll have a change of heart. But he's not going to do that, so it doesn't matter. The Bears suck.
He will.
I know.
3 touchdowns again this week. 3 touchdowns again this week, and now all of a sudden, Mike White in 2 games has more passing touchdowns than Zach Wilson has had all season.
Are you gonna put Mike White 3 touchdowns on your Payton's picks graphic this week?
Dude, I might. Normally I don't do player props on it, but I might put Mike White 3 touchdowns on the Payton's picks graphic.
Prop. That's a terrible prop. No one in America needs to bet that prop. That's a terrible prop. Mike White's not throwing 3 touchdowns against the Vikings. It's
the Vikings defense is Swiss cheese. Mac Jones looked like a good quarterback against the Vikings on Thanksgiving.
Okay, well, it was also.
I think you know a thing or two about that Vikings defense. We've had a few conversations about that.
It was a primetime game, right? And Kirk Cousins isn't good in primetime, so I mean,
Kirk Cousins doesn't play defense.
He doesn't play defense, but it was also a shootout. So like, both defenses looked bad on Sunday night. Did they not?
They did, but the Patriots also aren't as good as the record says.
It was 33-30. You think the Patriots are worse than what their record would indicate?
I do.
Well, I think Mike White is worse than what he showed us last week.
Because guess what? If Mike White was playing during that Patriots game, they win. So there you go. That's already another loss for the Patriots.
You don't believe that. You don't believe that with a straight.
You don't believe that after what we saw on Sunday, that Mike White couldn't put up more than 3 points against the Patriots. You don't think that Mike White could have gotten more than 2.1 millimeter per play in the second half? You don't think that? Did you see what he just did?
Are you talking about the Jets versus the Patriots? Are you saying if Mike White is in New England against Minnesota this past Sunday?
I'm talking about the Jets versus New England.
The Patriots?
Yes. If Mike White was the quarterback of that game, as opposed to Zach Wilson, they win.
What was the score? 3-10?
3-10. Yep.
And it was a game-winning punt return touchdown?
Game-winning punt return.
That's low-hanging fruit. So, I mean, I'd have to take it because it's low-hanging fruit. But it wouldn't be because of Mike White.
And I don't know. I'd rather have Mike White than Mac Jones.
All right, we're ending the show for each other. That's just absurd. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week. I don't know what day because Payton washes dishes some nights. Maybe it's Thursday, maybe it's Friday morning, maybe it's Wednesday morning. Whenever it is, you guys will know. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram at The Rundown PM.
The Rundown PM, yes.
Okay, yeah, The Rundown PM. We don't post on there, so I forgot. We need to start posting on there. Maybe we'll start with some clips from tonight's show. You can also follow us on TikTok, I would presume, under the same. Payton made the socials. I don't know why he's not telling you guys.
It's all The Rundown PM. That's all it is.
The Rundown PM on Instagram, on TikTok. We'll start posting clips and things like that. But you guys go enjoy Thursday Night Football. Bills Patriots should be a good one. Hopefully the Bills can get the win here, or we have to start talking about the Bills not being a good football team next week. Also, I have a major basketball announcement to make on the show next week whenever it happens. So be on the lookout for that as well. For my guy Payton, this is Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. You guys enjoy some football. We see you guys next week.